This is the CineSnob Podcast.
Hi, and welcome to episode 272 of the CineSnob Podcast. I am Jerrod Kingery.
I'm Cody Villafana.
Cody, it's been a month, roughly, since we've done this.
Yeah, there was a variety of vacations on both of our ends.
Yeah, you were all over the place, I know. We were in Las Vegas, so there was just taking some time, chilling out by the pool.
Nice. I was in Dallas and Denver.
How is Dallas these days? I haven't been in a while.
White. It's very white.
White?
Yeah.
Well, it depends on which part you go, I think. But that's probably let's say I've described this to people. Dallas is the one big city in Texas that's like the stereotypical Texas.
Yeah. I think that's fair. And I'm looking up the statistics. It looks like Dallas is 28% white.
See?
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying.
I guess
it just depends on where you go.
I guess the areas I was in were very white.
Well, yeah, where were you? Like Plano and where not Plano, Arlington? Is it Arlington? Where the ballpark is?
Yeah, I mean, I spent some time in there, but I was in like proper Dallas, the city of Dallas for most of it. Yeah, because it's a bit of a drive from where I was out to Arlington. Like it's, sitting in traffic, it's like a good 45 minutes.
Now, if you want to talk a white city, I think Denver, where you were in Denver, is pretty.
Denver also very white. Yeah,
pretty white. Yeah.
Yeah.
Red Rocks again, was it?
Yeah, another. I try to do a yearly Red Rocks trip, and so this was it this year.
I drove past there when I was there last year for work. Never actually been to Red Rocks.
It's pretty cool. It's very cool.
We were in the Denver airport for a layover to Vegas, which is still the weirdest airport I've ever been in.
The Denver or the Vegas or the Denver?
No, the Denver.
Oh.
The Vegas one is just weirdly small.
Yeah,
but
I don't know. I didn't. What was weird about it?
Oh, all the stuff that everybody talks about, the weird like art and the architecture and that scary horse out front.
I guess maybe I haven't seen, like, every time I've been to Denver, I've never been.
You've never seen the scary horse statue?
I've seen pictures of it, but I've never driven past it.
It's off-putting. It's weird.
Yeah,
it's a strange place. But anyway, we're back. And in the midst of us being gone, there was yet another labor strike in Hollywood. Of course, the writer's strike started, I believe, back in April, late April, maybe early May. I don't remember. Now the actors are on strike. SAG and AFTRA are on strike. What that means, I guess, if you haven't been following along, is most production on any film and TV show has stopped. Already a lot of stuff had stopped because of the writer's strike, which of course there was one, I guess, was it 2007, 2008 that was in the middle of like the TV season, and it really derailed a lot of stuff. And I think famously some pretty terrible movies came out of it, like the second Transformers movie and the second what's his name? Daniel Craig, James Bond.
Yeah, Quantum of Solace. There were also some really like some low TV points that came out of the strike. In particular, there's two I can think of, which was Lost. I think went through some challenges in that season, and then the Friday Night Lights murder plot was a part of the writer's strike. I believe.
I forgot about that being a victim of that season is not good.
Yeah.
The weird part, if you don't know, Friday Night Lights had that like super acclaimed first season, which was great, really low rated, and then the second season came along and it had this like crazy dramatic subplot about a murder where Jesse Plemons' character Landry, I didn't remember his last name, basically dumps a body in the river after.
Wasn't it like a self-defense killing, or he was protecting?
He was protecting. God, what is her name?
Adrian
Pilecki. Yeah. Already an unlikely storyline in that season, but anyway, they I think Jason Katims has talked about that, the showrunner, saying that claiming that wasn't NBC's directive, which I find really hard to believe.
Yeah.
At any rate, man, can you imagine a show like that being on network TV now? Like, there's no way in hell, right?
No.
I mean, it was barely back then. What else was there? I mean, like, I remember The Office getting like chunked out like that was supposed to be like a 30 episode season back when they still did that. Then of course, like the big fight this time is over streaming residuals amidst Hollywood studios really burying things. I think the latest casualty was it Paramount Plus or was it another Warner Brothers that memory holds some stuff? I know like Paramount Plus debuted Rise of the Pink Ladies, Grease Rise of the Pink Ladies, and threw that all out. And then I don't know. There's many numerous things that have been taken off streaming services. But anyway, more to the point about movies, since this is a movie podcast, it has potentially delayed some films that were already scheduled for release this year. Notably Dune 2, which is supposed to debut sometime later this year, along with Aquaman 2 and The Color Purple. Those are all three for Warner Brothers, I believe. What do you think? Is this thing going to last long enough for this stuff to be pushed back? I mean, can Hollywood afford to push this stuff back after kind of the shit year that's happened so far this summer?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I don't know too like enough about the strike to know that piece, but I do know that it seems like based on like everything you're hearing from like, you know, the top people or like Zaslav from, you know, Warner Brothers or whatever, or even what's his name? Someone said something not great recently. It was you're talking
about Bob Iger talking about the writer's demands being unrealistic.
Yeah. But you know, this is all stuff that like at some point this was going to be a huge problem, not just like not just figuring out residuals for streaming services, which is like a new ball game, especially compared to where things were in the previous strike, but you know, a lot of AI stuff that has been like bubbling to the surface in terms of like, I think the big thing was that they wanted to be able to like scan background actors and then pay them once for that, and then basically copy paste them into the background of other things without paying them any wages beyond that, which is insane.
I feel that is insane. I feel like that story is a bit of a horror story that was kind of bubbled to the top. I can't imagine that was a plan that was close to being put into motion. I don't know though. I don't pretend to know the exact details, but in strike situations, there's always the worst things always come bubbling to the top. Yeah. For these sort of things.
Yeah, but this is all stuff that just is going to have to get taken care of because this is the type of stuff that's going to impact the industry from here on out. So it becomes really important to figure that piece of it all out. And I have to assume that like the biggest complication of why this thing might last as long as it might is because they have to deal with streaming, and this was just something that was not a thing, you know, back at that point, because it's affecting both the writers and the actors equally. So
well, and you know, that's the thing that that we talk about this stuff being sort of memory hold. That's the idea behind getting rid of it, is that you don't have to pay residuals to the actors, and the streaming bubble is clearly bursting as we're watching. This stuff that maybe we were all too presumptuous as to what this was going to be, because I think the presumption of this, with the rise of stuff like Spotify and then Netflix, and then with Netflix kind of leading the way, and then something like Spotify sort of paving the way for all music to be available all the time forever. Mm-hmm. That was the idea that everybody bought into with these streaming services, is that, I bought Disney Plus, like I'm going to be able to watch Willow or any other ones they've taken off whenever the fuck I want to. And that's clearly not the case anymore. Whatever the idea behind taking it down is, whether it's the tax write-off that everybody seems to ascribe to the Batgirl thing, or the idea that they're not paying residuals to the cast of a show that is bombed. Already though, we're seeing that those residual checks, you see the checks that people post for like SAG residuals, they're like 31 cents that's being sent out to somebody who has a minor part on a show.
Eddie Pence,
I did see that.
Ramble co-host of mine, posted his residual check of 4 cents.
What was that from? Do you know?
I don't know what it was from. No.
Yeah, it seems to be a pretty. I've seen it before plenty of times with people I follow on social media. Just this pittance of a residual check, but this. I don't know how much of this is sustainable anymore. Like how much streaming stuff is just going to dry up, because there's already been talk of, at least from like Bob Iger with Disney, how the brand has been diluted with the Marvel stuff coming too often. I mean, I don't know about you, but I saw a trailer for the Marvels, I think before we saw Oppenheimer, and I could not be less interested. Not because of the content, but just because I haven't done the homework.
Yeah.
I haven't watched all of Ms. Marvel. I don't remember Captain Marvel enough, or I don't remember WandaVision enough. This is homework for three TV shows were homework for this movie to come out. And, who's to say that those things are going to stick around? I mean, I assume the Marvel stuff's not going anywhere, but who the fuck knows? Will I get to watch Ms. Marvel in 2 months when the film getting ready for the movie? Man, I don't know. I support the strike and everything, but man, I think we're in for a huge change in what's going to happen here, because the streaming thing obviously can't continue. These big IP movies have been really bombing at the box office comparatively. I think outside of something like Barbie and Super Mario Brothers earlier this year, the big IP things have really failed. Like you and I talked offline about audiences just outright rejecting The Flash.
Yeah.
Stuff like Indiana Jones underperforming. I don't remember what else has been really. Oh, Fast and Furious 9 or 10. What are we at? Fast 10.
Yeah.
I don't know. I guess we're in for a big change, but I don't know that these studios can afford to not have some sort of film out for Christmas again. I mean, are they going to kneecap the theaters once again after the pandemic? I don't know. It just doesn't seem like a smart plan, but none of this is really seems about preserving the art. But
I guess we'll see. And it's going to be an interesting next couple of months, because I assume that like these are around the times where those movies would normally be finished, and
yeah, and the biggest thing is like the promotional push that people talk about. Like, I don't know how.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Well, I guess there is stuff that has like premiered at festivals. Like I wonder if like Killers of the Flower Moon is entirely done because it's premiered at Cannes, and so like that'll be ready to go or whatever. Is it?
Yeah, I saw a tweet something about like basically we're going to be Best Picture is going to be Oppenheimer versus Killers of the Flower Moon because nothing else has been released.
Yeah.
But we talked about some studios have gotten waivers, like A24.
Yeah, A24. I think they provided waivers for 29 independent film projects, and A24 had a couple of them because from what I've read, they agreed to all of the demands. And so, this happens. I think this previously happened with some talk shows, right? Back in the day, where I think like didn't ABC meet it for Kimmel or something like that, and they were the first ones back?
I seem to recall that because the last
it was Letterman. Oh, it was Letterman because Letterman had his own production company.
Oh, yes,
and so he owned the show, and so they met the demands, and Letterman came back.
Yeah, because it was last time was just a writer's strike. Mm-hmm. I don't know how talk shows work. I assume I don't know if the hosts are like SAG-AFTRA members. I have no idea. I mean, I assume they all are because they've all appeared in, scripted performances. But I don't know, because that was one thing that surprised me, how none of those shows have come back yet. Because those came back, I believe, the last time after about a month, and they like retitled and, of course, led us to the famous Colbert, Jon Stewart, Conan like mega fight across like their 3 shows.
Yeah.
It sucks. It like the zombie nature of late night, it's still going. Like they're still playing episodes of the Late Late Show with James Corden, which wrapped in April.
And aren't they doing that thing where since part of the SAG strike is that you can't promote a film that's under strike, I think they're running like old clips or episodes with actors who are in movies that are coming out that week. So like
like Emily Blunt was on. They had a Colbert this week. Yeah, and then there's a lot of disclaimers I've seen on promotional stuff, like Jason Momoa is hosting Shark Week, and all that stuff is like previously recorded on before whatever it is.
I've seen that on some podcasts too, where either a host was or a guest was promoting something that was recorded in advance. It'll say like this was recorded prior to the the strike. So.
Yeah. I mean, I support it. I'm just it'd be nice to have it wrapped up and kind of get this whole shit settled, like so everybody can have a better future with this stuff, because none of it's sustainable right now, whether it's from the actors and writers or just the fucking content that gets put out. Like we hit critical mass in the last couple years, and it's just been downhill from there. Anyway, anything else to add before we move on, Cody?
No, I think that's good.
All right, let's go ahead and let's go ahead and move on to reviews.
Here are this week's reviews.
We have Barbie.
Hey, Barbie. Can I come to your house tonight?
Sure. I don't have anything big planned, just a giant blowout party with all the Barbies and planned choreography and a bespoke song. You should stop by.
So cool.
You can find me under the lights, diamonds under my eyes.
This is the best day ever. It is the best day ever, and so is yesterday, and so is tomorrow, and every day from now until forever. Do you guys ever think about dying?
When my heart breaks,
Some things have been happening that might be related.
when my world shakes,
Cold shower, falling off my roof, and my heels are on the ground. What do I have to do? You have to go to the real world.
You can go back to your regular life, or you can know the truth about the universe. The choice is now yours.
The first one, the high heel.
You have to want to know, okay? Do it again.
This is probably the most anticipated movie of the year, I would say. Fair enough. A huge movie weekend between this and Oppenheimer, which we're going to talk about a little later. Obviously, an adaptation of the doll, just I guess the concept of the doll. Yeah. Barbie never really has a story. The Mattel doll, directed by Greta Gerwig, who I've been a big fan of at least the last two of her films she's directed. Cody, tell us about Barbie and what you thought of it.
Yeah, so I'll kind of give a very brief synopsis here, which is just that the beginning of the movie takes place in Barbie Land, where it's sort of like an idyllic society that you see pictured there. That's sort of like full of dream houses and all of the major positions of power and stuff, like the Supreme Court and the president are women, and then just variations of Barbies, and then like the Kens are just sort of there to hang out and be I guess in pursuit of Barbie there. and so the main character, played by Margot Robbie, ends up having like a bit of like weird things happening to her in terms of just like being self-aware and having like an existential crisis. And so she finds out that the human that she is connected to is going through something, and so she goes to the real world to try to fix that, and Ken follows along. And once they get to the real world, both Barbie and Ken discover the patriarchy that is in place in the real world, and Barbie becomes kind of mortified by it, and Ken sees it as an opportunity and takes the patriarchy back to Barbie Land, and that's kind of the setup of the movie in a nutshell. You mentioned an adaptation of the toy, and I think that these are kind of interesting times in which all sorts of IP is being mined for a variety of different things. You can see it work in a variety of different ways, and I think that one thing that we reference all the time here is the Lego movie, which is taking a property and like really making something really unique and interesting with it, having it be a blank slate. And then there was one recently that is slipping my mind where we complained about the opposite.
Which one? One of these Super Mario Brothers.
Super Mario Brothers, yes.
Yeah.
Where again, no real narrative there, but finding like the most generic way to tell it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that this is an example of taking, a toy with no real narrative attached to it and doing something really interesting and clever and meta and having it be a commentary on modern society, and having fun with it at the same time. I think we can start with the cast, which I think is really great top to bottom. Margot Robbie is great as Barbie. Ryan Gosling as Ken is probably the sort of like, take away MVP of the movie, who is very, very funny in this role, playing just a dumb person.
But like a really dumb, but charming.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, MVP I think is easily Gosling.
Yeah, and then you have like some other Barbies who I think Emma Mackey is good in her part, and there's some good stuff with Issa Rae and stuff. And then I think as far as like the other real world characters go, I mean, I think a lot of people are talking about America Ferrera's part here, especially in like a monologue that happens towards the end. And so I think the cast is like pretty impeccable. I think the set design and production design is really great too. I think all of the sort of Barbie Land stuff looks really great. And it's very, bright and colorful and also like appropriately shitty when it needs to be. And I think using like, really fake looking stuff to its benefit. Like I think it mines a lot of comedy out of that. And I think, like I said, it has this blank slate to it, and I think both to the film's benefit and to its detriment, I think Greta Gerwig and then Noah Baumbach, who co-wrote the movie with her, it's a very ambitious movie in that it really tries to pack a lot in terms of not only like narrative storylines, but also its messaging, its commentary, the things that it's kind of talking about and discussing. And I think it does so to a varying degree of success. I don't think that anything within the movie is necessarily bad, but I do think that there are some elements that work better than others. And I think, I am clearly not the right person to talk about the success of its sort of like feminist message, but I do think that it does so successfully. I think that, there are some parts of that are, a little on the nose at times. I think that it can get to be a little bit obvious at times. I think that the winking into the camera is a little bit, again, clear sometimes. And then there's stuff that I think is really clever and really smart, really incisive commentary on that thing. I do love. And it is funny to see like a bunch of like right-wing people getting bent out of shape over this, because it really does make men look like complete idiots in many parts of the movie, and I think it does so to a degree that's really funny. And I think in particular like Ken is like the conduit for that, or Ryan Gosling's Ken, where he's the butt of many jokes as far as that's concerned. There's some of my favorite stuff in the movie is like Ryan Gosling discovering the patriarchy throughout, and just kind of making observations about expecting certain things, or things being really easy for him, and I think that like it's that stuff I think is really funny, but I think that there's like dueling main theme concepts throughout, and I think part of the commentary is like what it is like to be alive, like what it is to live. And I think it does so with sort of like the, a doll discovering, having autonomy or whatever. And then a lot of it is like what it's like to live as a woman. And I think those are kind of like your two main ideas behind it. And I think that the stuff about what it's like to live as a woman works really well and lands really well. The existential stuff about what it's like to be alive, to me, doesn't hit as well or as hard. And I also think that part feeds into the weakest elements of the movie for me. And that primarily is like, there's a story with like Rhea Perlman as like the creator of Barbie that's kind of like this meta thing that is about like existence and stuff like that. And I don't think that stuff works really all that well, which also plays into what I think is kind of a somewhat weak third act, where that is a big part of the story. And I just don't think that stuff lands as hard as like, having your America Ferrera, which again is a very on the nose, like statement or speech, but really powerful in effect. I don't know. I mean, I went to just like a regular non-press screening. I think you did too for this. Mm-hmm. And like the audience like was cheering at the end of that in my screening for sure. Yeah.
I mean, I think I mentioned it to you. It is playing to the cheap seats, I think. So if you're not already kind of, I guess a little more socially aware, that it may be a little bit more eye-opening than for you or I or somebody else that maybe is a little more. And I don't want to I'm not trying to paint us as elites or anything, but we consume a lot of art.
Yeah, for sure. And then the other thing about it too is that like when I'm talking about the stuff that's successful and not successful, like I said, there's a lot of ambitious stuff going here, and I do think that there are some storylines that don't work as well. For me personally, the Will Ferrell Mattel storyline really does not need to be there. I don't think. I think that could have been like a generic thing, where it's just like, a cut to every so often. But as soon as like the Mattel people are like on their way to Barbie Land, like that story just sort of fizzles and dies. And kind of, is maybe one plot point too much for me. Yeah. That said, I mean, I had a lot of fun with this movie. I think I was, if not laughing, smiling throughout it. I do think that its commentary is most of the time really sharp. I do like when it gets meta. There's a really funny moment when Margot Robbie's giving a speech where the narration comes over and makes a joke about the casting. It's very meta. And it's really funny. And those are the clever elements of it that I think really push it over the top. So for me, I thought it's a really enjoyable experience. And while it's not a perfect movie, I think it works way more often than it doesn't.
Yeah, I really enjoyed it. I agree with most of what you're saying. I did like the existential stuff a little bit more than you did. I do think, though, that the framing device that sets up the first act is filled with, I don't know that it's as successful as it really should be. I kind of feel like it's like the idea that there's somebody playing with Margot Robbie's Barbie that's unhappy and has drawn these characteristics into her existence. I don't know that it really goes anywhere or really feels like anything. And it feels like it's kind of abandoned also, which I'm fine with. It gets us to the point where we're supposed to be at, and that's with Barbie and Ken in the real world, kind of exploring what's happening. The idea that Barbie Land is this idyllic place for women, and that you get this with Ariana Greenblatt's character, who plays like the teenage daughter of America Ferrera, that Barbie's kind of ruined the lives of these children, with their unrealistic expectations. And I love the movie for bringing that up. I also feel like the movie doesn't reflect the real world values of Mattel in this, because this has been kind of my lifelong complaint, and not mine personally, but like a complaint that's lasted my entire life, is that Barbie sets unrealistic expectations for women and girls, which I think probably still rings true. The movie hints at that and then doesn't really do anything about it. which is, I guess, fine. I guess it's fine because it's this corporate product. There's massive toy companies, one of the most popular toys in the world. It touches on the idea. It touches on kind of an antithesis to that. With there's a point where the Kens sort of take over Barbie Land, and that somehow manifests itself into a new toy that ends up flying off the shelves. Mm-hmm. Which that's a great joke. I don't know that it fits in the comment with the commentary behind the film. Mm-hmm. So, again, I think that this is a product, like there's a lot of social ideas being put behind this thing that's still just a product at the end of the day, which is fine. It's not Greta Gerwig's fault. It's not whatever. I mean, I think given the material, I think it works really well. I do kind of wonder where or how this affects Barbie in the future. Like, will there finally be some sort of wider representation? Because this movie is, the representation here within Barbie Land is some of the most diverse you'll ever see. Mm-hmm. There's Margot Robbie is the stereotypical Barbie, but then there's a trans woman Barbie, there's a larger woman Barbie, there's all kinds of different people represented here that are not represented in Barbie products. Mm-hmm. At least as far as I know. I don't, unless something's changed in the last 15 years, I'm seriously skeptical of that. So that does kind of weaken the commentary a little bit for me, but I think ultimately it all really works. Despite the Will Ferrell thing, I still love Will Ferrell. I think it's kind of the limpest of the storylines. Gosling's Ken is the MVP. I do like that there's no real villain to the story. Mm-hmm. Like, there's nobody that's irredeemable. It's just sort of bumbling idiots stumbling into something. Yeah. There's some really great gags. I think one of the greatest gags is the wall that the Kens are building. Mm-hmm. That Michael Cera's Alan character calls out. I rolled out of my seat laughing on that one almost. Just for what it is, for this product, again, like you mentioned the Lego movie, you mentioned Super Mario Brothers, this movie that has, based on an IP that has no real storyline, what was constructed, I think, is really, really great. I think the Lego movie is probably the closest analog it has. I think the Lego movie is better, but I think this is a really, really good movie. Mm-hmm. Anyway, what's your grade for Barbie, Cody?
Yeah, I mean, again, I think despite its flaws and its ambitious nature, it is really, really solid. I think it's well written, it's well performed, it's funny, it's fun. And I like that it strikes that balance between being like legitimately fun, but also being, it has something to say. And I think to create out of an IP, that has like no anything behind it and having a blank slate, you look at something like Super Mario Brothers, which has nothing to say. This has a lot to say. So I give it a B+.
Yeah, B+ for me too. I think that, we mentioned the kind of right-wing outrage at this. I do think that the movie does try to address the concerns that have been had by many people over the years about the sort of image that Barbie puts out for young girls. Again, I don't feel like there's anything to be done that, at least at this level yet, by Mattel and the toys that exist, like, as to what's going to happen. But what the fuck did these people expect this movie to be about?
Right.
I don't quite understand what the outrage. I mean, I guess I get it. Outrage is a machine that feeds itself, but I kind of wonder what you expected from a Barbie movie if you walked in it blindly, wondering exactly what the fuck this movie was going to be about.
I don't know.
Anyway.
That's a great question.
It has proven for making some hilarious memes online about the outrage that's being experienced.
Yeah.
All right, let's go ahead and move on to our next movie, Oppenheimer.
We've got one hope. All America's industrial might and scientific innovation connected here. A secret laboratory. Keep everyone there until it's done. Let's go recruit some scientists. Build a town, build it fast. If we don't let scientists bring their families, we'll never get the best.
Why would we go to the middle of nowhere for who knows how long?
Why? Why? How about because this is the most important thing to ever happen in the history of the world?
You're the great improviser, but this you can't do in your head.
Are we saying there's a chance that when we push that button, we destroy the world?
Chances are near zero.
Near zero.
What do you want from theory alone?
0 would be nice.
This is the latest from director Christopher Nolan, who also co-wrote this film. Obviously, again, we talked about this being a huge movie weekend. The first one in, for as long as I can remember, where there's 2 movies that were genuinely highly anticipated. Obviously, Barbie came out on top, biggest opening of the year so far, but Oppenheimer did really well too. Cody, tell us about Oppenheimer and what you thought of it.
Yes, so the latest from director Christopher Nolan, who most recently had the pandemic movie Tenet that was supposed to save movie theaters that maybe didn't so much do that.
It was way too soon. It was way too soon.
Yeah. A director that I mostly like quite a bit, despite, I think, some clear flaws as a filmmaker. And this is, again, a much anticipated movie about Robert Oppenheimer, excuse me.
J. Robert Oppenheimer.
Who led the Manhattan Project to build the atomic bomb, and sort of like the lead up to and testing of the bomb, and then ultimately like the fallout of the bombing from the perspective of both his sort of internal dealings with it, and then a couple of things that happened towards the end of the movie in terms of like hearings that happened about his reputation and the efforts to kind of tear it down. And I had, for anyone local who's following the news here, there's been a bit of a debacle here in San Antonio regarding these Oppenheimer screenings. So Oppenheimer, or excuse me, the River Center IMAX here in San Antonio is one of only, I think, like 19.
I believe there's 19 in the United States. Yeah, 30 worldwide, something like that.
Yeah, 19 theaters in the United States that has full 70 millimeter IMAX capabilities, and one of 2 in the state of Texas here in Dallas. And our screening was supposed to be in 70 millimeter IMAX. It was not. We just got regular digital IMAX.
To be clear, that's IMAX film 70 millimeter.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then throughout the weekend, there have been major tech issues here in San Antonio that have derailed screenings. People have been driving hours to San Antonio to watch the movie and then having it fail within a matter of minutes. And so it's been a bit of a debacle. And it's interesting to see a movie like this where, in my opinion, I don't think that IMAX adds much to the table aside from a handful of scenes.
Yeah.
Because it is very dialogue driven. It is a lot of people in a lot of rooms talking. Its most quote unquote explosive scenes probably happen in hearings, and so, aside from like the actual testing of the bomb, it is strange to me that there is a lot being made of this. Like, sure, it's immersive, but for me, like, the sound is the more impressive thing about the movie than the visuals, because I do think that the sound design is really well done. And I don't know. I think we're going to have differing opinions on this because this movie, for me, really doesn't work very well. I think that it highlights some of those weaknesses that I said that Christopher Nolan has, where, the first one is, I think that he is a great director. I think he is an average writer. And I think that this screenplay is done completely by him, I believe. And I think normally he has collaborators, be it his, like, I think his brother does a lot of his films with him.
Jonathan Nolan. I know he did at least The Dark Knight or one of the Batman films. I don't remember which one, but yeah.
Yeah, and I'm actually going to look it up because I'm curious. Yeah, I mean, I guess Nolan, wrote Inception by himself, and But I don't think I don't consider his screenwriting his strong suit, and I think he can have the tendency to try to outsmart himself a few times, and so there's some elements of like, pulling the prestige in his own movies, sometimes, and kind of like leaving moments that are not necessarily twists, but like when the hammer comes down on a lot of this stuff all at once. And so I think that for me it feels like, and I know it's kind of a cliche to call something like Sorkin-esque when it is a lot of like quippy fast dialogue, but this feels like a light version of like a prestige drama where I think that it wants to be really well written with a lot of sharp pieces of dialogue, and to me it never really gets there. In that sense. I also think that it speaks to another weakness of his, which is his writing specifically of female characters. And I think this is some of the worst of those tendencies here. You have two main female characters in the movie played by Florence Pugh and Emily Blunt. And, it becomes very apparent early on that these characters in the movie have no like either arc or storyline or dialogue that is like independent of their relationship to Oppenheimer, or how they're feeling about him, or what he's doing, or what he's thinking at any time. Florence Pugh I think it's the short end of the stick here a little bit, where she essentially is like in like a handful of scenes in like nude most of the time. And in everything that she says is in direct relationship to, again, like what Oppenheimer is doing, or being dependent on him in some way. And then Emily Blunt's character is like cut off at the knees throughout the entire time, because every single scene she's drunk in. So like nothing she's saying is resonant. She has one like fire-filled moment, which again she's great in, and Florence Pugh is good in too. But she has this one, moment towards the end of the movie, which like again would hit harder if she wasn't drunk in every other scene leading up to that or leading up to that moment. For the movie itself, the word I keep coming back to is I found the whole thing tedious. Like, it's 3 hours long. To me, it feels it. If we're talking about like check your watch movies, I think, for me, I check the time a handful of time. And I think in particular, the first hour for me, I looked at my phone and only an hour had gone by, and I'm like, fuck, I can't believe there's another 2 hours of this. Because a lot of it is really like the building of the bomb, and like how they came, they got to that point, how Oppenheimer used his connections and relationships with other people to help put together a team. And to me, that stuff was just a little boring and dry to me. I didn't find it very engaging. And then you get to the testing of the bomb, and then the final third of the movie is like all hearings. So there's dual hearings. One is with Robert Downey Jr.'s character, who is trying to get confirmation onto a political cabinet. And then with Oppenheimer having his security clearance taken away and being under a hearing to fight for that. And like, again, while those moments are well acted and intense at parts, it gets so in the weeds of the minutia of like different stories that take place, and it starts to like cross over in its timelines, which is a very Nolan thing to do. Yeah. And then and then like the hearing of Downey Jr. again, like, it's good, like it's well acted, but like I don't care. I didn't care at that point about any of that stuff that was happening. And so it is crazy to me that this is like a historical drama. Like, it's not an action movie, it's not a thriller movie. This is like a political thriller almost. And for me, having a 3-hour political thriller that ends in an hour of hearings just did not connect with me. I also think that it doesn't do nearly enough or spend nearly enough of its runtime on what I think is the most important and interesting element of the movie, which is Oppenheimer dealing with the moral complexity of designing the bomb and handing it off to the military to do whatever they want with it. There's a metaphor that they use, or they use, the idea of like, this is something that they're giving man the tools to destroy itself, right?
Prometheus.
Yeah.
Prometheus.
Yes. Yeah, with Prometheus and fire, right? And
well, yeah, Prometheus, the Greek myth that Prometheus gave man fire and was tortured for it.
Yeah, and I think that there's elements of that work, but like the sort of like the very specific, like, this guy sort of like reconciling his role that he played in here. Like, it's played out in like one or two scenes, one in particular when he's giving a speech, which I think actually is really well done and maybe my favorite thing of the movie, especially with how it works with sound design within that.
Yeah, that's a very effective scene. Yeah.
Yeah, and to me, I want more of that. You have a 3-hour movie and you have this very like morally complex thing of this guy who like how is he viewed? How does history view him? This guy who built this thing that like, and I get the purposeful nature of like not showing the fallout or not talking about the effects of it instead of just like talking about it from numbers and like to show how removed they were, which is, sort of played out in that Truman scene that happens. But for me, if you're going to have a 3-hour movie, you're going to dedicate an hour of that to hearings. You're going to put 2 hours into the building of the bomb. You got to give more time to this moral quandary that is explored in like only like the bare minimum amount to count. And that's what I wanted more of. And so for me, the balance seems off. I don't find it as thrilling as I think a lot of people are. And I just found it like really tedious and overlong, and it just didn't come together for me, despite having some good elements. And I should say too, Robert Downey Jr. is really great.
Robert Downey Jr. is really great. I do think that is probably the most confounding part of the movie is his, like, the overall presence of Robert Downey Jr.'s character, which is not really, I hate to say, I don't know that the movie quite fleshes out the rivalry enough. And I talked to you about this too offline, but it's a Nolan thing, and it reminds me a lot of The Prestige, about Hugh Jackman in The Prestige, where this asshole gets kind of caught up in his own thing, and you spend. Obviously, there was more reason to spend time with Hugh Jackman's character. Feels like there's less reason to spend so much time with Robert Downey Jr.'s character in this film, but this asshole that gets, I think you mentioned this, a tweet like that, a biography about a character spends like 50 pages on a character who hates the main character. Like, why are we talking about this? Yeah. I think it's really good. I think Downey Jr. is really, really good in this. I do think that hearing stuff and those kind of parallel timelines, they feel a little out of place from time to time. I, on the other hand, really loved the idea of the kind of putting together a team. I don't know. I get really geeked out about the putting together a team aspect when it comes to this stuff. It doesn't hurt that this is like a who's who of, well, let's just say it, who's who of white actors and white middle-aged actors in Hollywood. You get Josh Hartnett, kind of unrecognizable. You get David Krumholtz, really super unrecognizable. You get Gary Oldman, who I had to look at the credits to realize that was Gary Oldman. Matt Damon is great in the film, gets some great lines. You like Jack Quaid's in it for like 2 seconds. Alden Ehrenreich is in it. Rami Malek, who's in it, who they kind of trick you into thinking he's just going to be there for a few seconds. Rami Malek. Too many more to name. But Kenneth Branagh, someone else I'm forgetting, but yeah, again, you are right. Florence Pugh and Emily Blunt kind of get the short end of the stick. I can give it a little bit more of a pass since it is a historical drama about a guy who was kind of terrible to women, kind of a womanizer. But yeah, it is what it is. None of their lines would further the story for themselves. It's only to further Oppenheimer. And then Florence Pugh's character has a tragedy that just sort of you view that through the lens of how that impacts Oppenheimer as opposed to anything else. But I don't think the 40s were a great time for women anyway. That this is kind of echoing that is unfortunate, but maybe.
I will say something I missed was that I want to also point out Matt Damon too, because I do think that the movie does pick up considerably once he shows up.
Yes, I think he's a great bright spot. There's some other things that pop in there too, that are kind of I don't want to say fun, but a little more lighthearted than you might expect. Because there's a scene where they're kind of all preparing for the test explosion, where you see how different people are reacting to it and preparing for it. But yeah, the last third of the movie, I'm not quite sure holds up to the first 2/3, just because, like you said, it does involve a lot of hearings, which I don't quite. I don't know. Maybe I wasn't quite in tune with what was happening, because you're kind of. You get the explosion of the bomb after it's tested, and then you get this you get another hour of sort of minutia about, regarding McCarthyism and the moral quandaries of isotopes and exporting them and the effects of a bomb and the effects of the arms race and the escalation into hydrogen bombs and then the escalation into nuclear weapons. And, it all sort of, it's history. Maybe maybe you don't know about the Cold War. I don't know. But it does sort of, it feels a little draggy there at the end. But all told, I think it was really effective and really kind of fascinating along the way. Just the science behind this, the idea that these people, the Prometheus myth comes up a lot and is mentioned a lot. But the idea that these people were doing it allegedly to save the world, it's often mentioned that, it's mentioned in the movie that he doesn't have a Nobel Prize. And I can't remember the metaphor, but the idea is that Alfred Nobel invented dynamite thinking it was going to end all wars. And obviously that's not where we're at, but, really well done. I think, it does suffer the Christopher Nolan flaws that I think a lot of his later stuff has, especially, I guess the idea that being not as clever not as clever as he thinks he is. There's some elements in here I don't really get why most of the Downey Jr. stuff is in black and white. I'm not quite sure what thematic symbolism that holds. There's subtitles at the beginning. One's fission, one's fusion. I'm not quite sure what that is meant to represent. Again, it is kind of startlingly straightforward biopic that has really, really grabbed the interest of the movie going public, which is something I never thought I'd ever see again. Mm-hmm. Like, this is the kind of movie that would have been a #1 movie in 1995, which is maybe refreshing to see. Maybe it takes a big budget filmmaker to, who made 3 massive superhero movies to garner excitement for this. But man, the turnout for this and the excitement for it is something that's really, really shocked me.
Yeah.
Anyway, what is your... Go ahead.
Yeah, I'll get into it.
No, what's your grade for Oppenheimer?
Yeah, so I mean, the thing that makes me think about this stuff is like, how much of this is like the pure Nolan of it all, right? Like,
right, that's fair.
If this same exact movie was by a different director who didn't have the reputation that he did, or this same movie was just released in regular theaters with no IMAX stuff attached to it, with all that behind it, would it do the same? Would people care enough? Would people drive out to the theater? And I don't know the answer to that, but it does make me wonder about how much of his, like, and I mean, like, good on him, like, good on a filmmaker using his reputation to not only create success, but do it in this kind of movie. We talk about all the time the sort of like awareness of the general movie going public. Are they caring about directors as much as they would? Like, are people excited about a new Spielberg movie? And then we've seen Spielberg movies not perform as well, like The Fabelmans. Right. Like, being a new Spielberg wasn't enough. But in this case, like, is being a Nolan movie enough to bring people out? And I think that the idea that you have this 3-hour historical drama with one explosion in it is kind of the
and people are flying across the country to see it in IMAX.
Yeah. But all that being said, and the good that I think it does for the movie industry, for me personally, it's not a movie that I think comes together. Like I said, I think that it's pretty dull for my taste. I was not enthralled by any part of it. I do think that it does kick in with Matt Damon. I do think Robert Downey Jr.'s performance is fantastic. I do think that Nolan is a great visual director, and I think the sound design in particular is really great in the film.
Which is something to be said, because he has been notorious for really muddy, shitty sound.
Yeah, that is true.
One of the things I loved, and this is a very small touch, but I loved the delay in the explosions. Like, because that's how you perceive light and sound.
Yeah.
Like, you see an explosion and then half a second later you hear the sound of it. Like, it's super well done. It's something that's also unexpected from Nolan.
I liked it up until the moment where it takes too long. But you know,
what do you mean?
Where there's seemingly like 30 or 40 seconds of people's reactions before you hear the sound, kind of thing.
Oh, well, that's realistic though. Like, have you ever heard the stories of, not the atomic bomb, but people like watching the space shuttle launch? Because you have to be miles away. And you get hit with the shockwave and the sound waves.
Right.
Anyway. What
I'm saying is that I like it when it's like the delay when they're testing it early on, as opposed to the way that it works in that particular scene. I didn't love that. But anyway, I'm giving it a C+ for me. I don't think it's not enough to recommend it. I will say I will see it again when it's outside of the sort of hype of it all, when it is like outside of the IMAX of it all, and just kind of take it in for what it is and see if that changes anything. But for me, I wouldn't recommend it.
Yeah, I'm going B+ on this one too. I mean, I think it's despite its flaws, I think it's super ambitious. It's super straightforward for the most part. I think until kind of the hearing stuff kind of left me a little confused. We haven't talked about him, but I really like Cillian Murphy, or is it Killian? I don't know how you say that. Killian. I was thinking of something. I do the soft C. I'm not British enough to do the hard C. I think he's really good. He's very haunting. I think Matt Damon's great. Who's the other one that I really, really like? Oh, David Krumholtz. I mean, unrecognizable, but man, I fucking love that guy. And like, terrifyingly looks like an old man now. But
yeah,
I think Matt Damon's really, really good in this. I think Robert Downey Jr. is great. I feel like, and I've seen this a few times, like Ryan Gosling versus Robert Downey Jr. for Best Supporting Actor, like already making those rounds. And I think that's a huge possibility. But yeah, B+ for me. I did ultimately come away really liking this. Again, I don't get the IMAX of this. I don't get it. Mm-hmm. Do I love that people are clamoring to see it in IMAX? Sure. I don't give a shit. I don't give a shit about that typically. This is certainly not the movie for IMAX as far as I'm concerned. But hey, more power to you. If it gets people out, if something is finally going to break the stranglehold of IP, established IP, it's this fucking summer that's going to do it. I mean, obviously Barbie is established IP, but there's no like story there to it.
Right. No,
but like something like
sequel.
Right. Like these things that are original storytelling. Man, I would love to see more of it. I mean, I fucking love historical dramas like this. A good political thriller. I mean, fuck, when was the last time that happened in a theater? I don't remember. Mm-hmm. Anyway, B+ for me. That's going to do it for this week. Next week, Cody, I believe we have, is it The Haunted Mansion next week?
Yeah, next week we have, let me pull everything up. So we have Haunted Mansion next week. We also have Talk to Me, which is an A24 horror movie that I saw at Sundance, I think.
Oh boy, I need to see if I can see that, but I will be seeing Haunted Mansion.
Yeah, I think I'm pretty sure that for sure Talk to Me is going to be showing at Draft House, and I think they may. I don't know if they had a press screening there. They had one here last week. And then there's a movie that I'm going to be checking out. I don't know if I can get you on board with it, but it is It's a Japanese animation movie called let me see what it's called. It's called The First Slam Dunk. It's like a basketball movie that I've read really great reviews of it being like a really high quality sports movie. And so
that sounds interesting to me. We've talked about this before. I never was able to get into anime.
Yeah. Well, we'll talk about it off mic. You can watch the trailer and see what you think.
I just looked it up right now. But cool. Anything? I already asked that. If you want to reach us, you can email us at podcast@cinesnob.net. Find us on Twitter @cinesnob, Facebook cinesnobnet, youtube.com/cinesnob. Cody, you talked about the ramble earlier. Is that still happening for you?
Yeah, there was a week off this week while Jerry had some family in town, but hopefully back to it this week with some episodes if I can make it. But they'll be on. Jerry and Eddie will be on for sure.
Cool. All right. Anything else before we go?
No, I think that's it.
All right. On that note, I'm Jerrod Kingery.
I'm Cody Villafania.
Thank you for listening to the CineSnob Podcast. To read reviews, interviews, and more, visit cinesnob.net. See you next week.